Matt Whitaker, former U.S. Acting Attorney General.
This is such a great conversation about America, our future, what's going to save our republic.
We have a great football player. Matt Whitaker is here. Matt.
They tried to bury me. They didn't realize I was a seed.
It's a touchdown. Whitaker.
Former Acting U.S. Attorney General.
Under President Trump.
I'm going to be an unwavering supporter of law enforcement.
Welcome to Liberty and Justice with your host, Matt Whitaker.
Today's episode is sponsored by Save Missouri Values PAC.
Welcome to Liberty and Justice. I'm Matt Whitaker. So excited to have my friend Scott Turner on. Scott, thanks for joining us.
Great to be with you, Matt. Looking forward to it.
I have, this is, I think, the 15th episode of Liberty and Justice. And since I started the show, I've been trying to get you on. I thought I had you at the AFPI thing we had a couple of weeks ago, but we weren't able to coordinate our schedules. And so this is something that I've been looking forward to because, you know, what I know about you and I both competed against each other. You're a little younger than me, but in, 91, 92, we were both playing in the Big Ten. You for Illinois, me for Iowa. And we've had that connection and that shared experience. Right. And so but your story is better than mine. And I'll tell you why. Because, oftentimes on this show, Scott, we highlight sort of people that have lived the American dream. And while, I grew up in suburban Des Moines, Iowa, my parents, put me in the best school that always turned out college football players. Your story, I don't think people would have, put money on you as a 15-year-old and said, this kid's going to play for a decade in the NFL. So why don't you tell me, in the granular details, kind of how you got from, you growing up and then ultimately, and some of the challenges you faced, but ultimately how you played in the NFL and played so successfully.
Well, thank you, Matt. And you're a great example of what a true patriot and American servant leader is. And I so appreciate you and your service to our country. You're a tremendous athlete. Obviously, you played at the University of Iowa, the Hawkeyes.
The University of Iowa, we call it, right?
The University of Iowa, that's right. And so I just really appreciate you. My story is one where it is filled with grace and mercy. And really the hand of God snatched me out of a very difficult situation and putting the right people around me every step of the way. And I say that because I came from two loving parents. My parents were married when they were 18 years old, right out of high school. And they had me right out of high school. But unfortunately, my parents' marriage didn't last past 10 years. Because it was filled with violence, domestic violence, abuse, a lot of anger, alcohol. And so my father taught me a tremendous work ethic. My mother taught me to have a tremendous faith in the Lord. But their marriage didn't work out. And because of that, the child suffers. And I was a product of a broken family, a broken home. And in particular in the Black community, you just become really another number, another statistic, if you will, of a young kid from a broken home, from a poor family, But, the Lord had a different plan. And as I said, I learned those two things from my parents about working hard and having tremendous faith. And along the way, people came alongside of me to help me to realize that I had talent, yes, athletically, but also scholastically. And people to help me along the way to tell me, you can be somebody. Even though you came from a distressed, broken situation, you can make something out of yourself. And so from a high level overview, I'm very grateful for those people that came alongside of me, be it coaches, be it teachers, be it family, not my birth family, but other families in the community and from my school, in particular the Basso family, who came alongside of me to teach me and to help my mother, as she was trying to raise me as a single mother. And so, Matt, my story, as I said, is one filled with grace and people coming alongside of me. When I went to Illinois, I knew nothing about college. Nobody in my family had ever been to college. I was a first generation college student, in particular a college athlete. But my godfather, Dan Basso, he just passed away 2.5 months ago. But way back when in 1990, he asked me where I was getting recruited. And so I started telling him these schools that I was being recruited from. And, I was like, Arkansas and USC and Notre Dame, as you've been through this process. And then I was in this one school called Illinois. And I said, but I think I'm going to go to Arkansas, because they're going to let me run track and play football. He said, no. He said, I went to Illinois, and so that's where you're going. And so I ended my recruiting process right then. I went to the University of Illinois. I met my wife at Illinois. I ran track and played football. And then, as you stated earlier, got drafted in 1995 and played 9 years in the National Football League.
Well, hold on. I'm gonna call a stop because you just skipped over the best parts of this story, and I've heard it. You're too complimentary. I am a humble sinner at best, and someone that sort of oftentimes fails, but through grace, to your point, I have been saved, and feel like I'm going to do the best I can to fulfill the calling that we all are called to do and grow and expand God's kingdom. That's why maybe one of the reasons I'm always attracted to you is because you are so firm in your faith and in your beliefs, in a risen Savior. But let's talk about high school. Let's focus in that minute.
All right.
So you grew up in my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, but you did not grow up in an affluent community outside of Dallas, did you?
No, I grew up in Richardson, Texas.
Okay.
And I went to J.J. Pierce High School, and we were probably the poorest family at J.J. Pierce. Mm-hmm. But that is a tremendous school. It is to this day. And I was a two-sport athlete in high school. And I did pretty well in school as far as, my grades were up to par. I had a great counselor at J.J. Pierce that encouraged me along the way. I didn't even know I had to take the ACT and the SAT, and she taught me and helped me, and I did pretty good on those tests and received a scholarship to Illinois. And while at high school, I also worked at a barbecue restaurant called Spring Creek Barbecue. I was a dishwasher. Yeah. And, a lot of my friends used to come through the restaurant and laugh at me because they were out going to parties and hanging out, but I was in the back in the kitchen, filled with suds and barbecue sauce for being a dishwasher. But I'm so grateful for those times because it taught me to be faithful in the little things. It taught me to be humble, as you said.
Well, and you and I share that same background. I was a dishwasher at Mr. K's restaurant in Ankeny, Iowa. And I really think maybe this is the solution to teaching kids how to be successful is making them wash dishes in a restaurant for a year or two, because not only did you see how hard you had to work and, under really tough conditions, always hot, the sort of the chemicals that you're using to disinfect that, and just you're seeing everybody's leftovers, what they didn't want to eat. And then on top of that, you're interacting with the cooks and the waitresses and the staff, and seeing how hard adults have to work to provide for their families, to put food on the table. And certainly,
that's right.
I think in modern day America, college education, one that you and I both got through playing football in the Big Ten, I think is a way out of sort of those opportunities. And I'm not suggesting, listen, nobody listening to this should suggest that I grew up in really difficult situation. My mom and dad, who are still alive in their 80s, provided everything I needed, but not too much. Right. And they put me in a community that was valued really sports above all else. And so I ended up playing baseball, run track, playing basketball, and playing football throughout through my senior year. And that obviously enabled me to sort of do other things. But I think the dishwashing, you said that, and I thought to myself, that's a moment in time. I did that for 2 years, and it was hard, and it showed me that I didn't want to be dishwashing the rest of my life. But I do like barbecue, so I would have probably stayed at a barbecue restaurant for as long as I could in a job like that. Mine was more of a fast service kind of breakfast place, but it was a great life experience. So you go to Illinois, and you start as a freshman, if I remember right?
Well, when I went to Illinois, I went in as a running back.
Okay.
And I mean, you know me, I'm not the biggest guy. But I did run track, and so I had a little speed. And so I went in as a running back, and I played running back my whole life, going up to Illinois. But when I got there, they said, well, man, you're so small, I mean, I'm 5'10", 172 pounds at that time, so I'm not the smallest guy, but I'm definitely not the biggest guy, and particularly running back in the Big Ten. You got the Tyrone Wheatleys of the world.
Well, we had Nick Bell, if you remember. Yeah, we had Nick Bell, who was 6'5", 45 pounds.
Right.
So, yeah, there's some big boys.
Right. So they switched me to receiver, back to running back. So the first 3 years, they would just switch me back and forth.
Yeah.
And then I was playing special teams. And then my sophomore year or my junior year, I suffered a broken jaw in practice. And so I missed all my junior year until the bowl game. And then my senior year, they moved me to defensive back. So they took me out of my comfort zone. I have never played defense. I've never even backpedaled, Matt, ever. And, it's one of those
different.
times.
And so for a track guy, running backwards is something you don't do. Maybe
Ever.
Warming up at most.
Right. And that's it. That's the only time you run backwards. But now they want me to play cornerback. And, I say this because oftentimes, the Lord will take us out of our comfort zone to grow us, to stretch us, really to mold us and to break things off of us and to teach us. And Sherman Smith, who was discipling me at the time, he was a former NFL player and he was a current coach at Illinois. He said, if you get an opportunity to go to defense, you should take it. And Aeneas Williams, who was in the league at the time, was also mentoring me, and he said, you can do it. And so when they told me they were going to switch me to cornerback, I watched the guys that were in front of me, and I learned from them. How do you backpedal? What does it mean to backpedal and then to stop and go forward in 2 steps, right? That was all a foreign concept to me. But, Matt, what it did to me is it stretched me, and it taught me. And it put me in a position to where I had to learn how, not just to play the position, but to hone my craft and become excellent in what I was doing. So the little things, as you know, matter so much.
Well, and you point out an important concept that I have tried to teach my children, all the kids I've coached, and it's something that I didn't learn from my parents, and I wish every parent would teach their kids, and that is the concept of a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. When you start anything new, it's going to be hard. And right. I think a lot of people, if it doesn't come easy, they're willing to quit because they have a fixed mindset. It's the way they've always been. But you clearly had a growth mindset where you knew that sort of your first day running backwards with somebody running at you full speed was, you could get better from that you would improve with time. And I think that's such an important concept. And, when it plays out in someone's life, I always like to highlight that. So you're playing in Illinois, your senior year, you have a good year. And so, of course, you get invited to the NFL scouting combine, right?
No. I should have.
I know the story, so.
One would think that I was a starter on the defense at Illinois. And as you remember, man, we had a top-notch defense. I mean, we had, NFL prospects on our defense and had a tremendous group of guys, and I was a starter. And so you would think that because of that and having a decent year that I would get invited to the combine. But I tell people all the time, I looked at my mailbox for my invitation for 2 weeks, and the invitation never came. And, a lot of times in life, Matt, when we're looking for something or expecting something to come, or someone, and it doesn't show up, or they don't show up, as you said, man, we want to quit. We want to throw in the towel and give in. But my mindset was, man, I have come too far. And, when my parents got divorced, I was standing on the porch with my mother when my father left our house. And I told my mom I was going to the NFL that day. I was 10 years old. I'll never forget it. And now here you are. I'm 23 years old. I'm getting ready to graduate from college. Well, I've already graduated. The NFL Combine is here. I don't have an invitation. There's no teams calling me, but the dream was still just as strong. And so what I started doing, I started running stadium steps. Memorial Stadium in Champaign, Illinois. I would run all 3 tiers as fast as I could. until I couldn't even feel my legs. I mean, my legs were numb. My heart was about to jump out of my chest. But the dream and the vision and the promise kept me going. And my faith was pulling me, even though I had no phone calls from teams, no invitation from anyone. And a lot of times, even today, and I hope that when your listeners see this, when the dream doesn't seem like it's going to come, when it seems like, your aspirations are not coming to pass, that's not the time to give in. That's the time to even dig in even further and have a greater vision and stay focused and put one step in front of another. I didn't want to work out by myself every day. I didn't want to run stadium steps every day. I didn't even want to go to school. I was in graduate school at the time, but I knew I had to do what I had to do to get out of my comfort zone to bring what in my control. Now, God's in ultimate control, but in my control to do what I needed to do.
Yeah. And so you do get a chance because there's these things called pro days. There's a combine where they invite people and they pick them apart. But then there's a pro day where every senior has a chance to run and do some testing with NFL scouts. And I went through the same experience. But I think this is maybe where your fortunes and your hard work all came together. Tell this story because I think it's so amazing.
Well, thank you. So, we had a pro day. My agent called and said, hey, there's about 22 teams coming to Illinois to get a second look at the guys they just saw at the combine. And my agent asked if I could work out for them. And they gave him permission. That's fine. I could work out. And so the teams came to Memorial Stadium. We had an indoor facility at that time. It was a bubble over the field. Yeah. And when they came in the door, I mean, all of these teams, you saw all the logos. You've seen it, Jacksonville, Carolina, Washington, Oakland Raiders. Remember them, the Houston Oilers. Oh, yeah. They all came in, and I don't remember every team. And they said, guys, we're going to run a 40-yard dash. And my heart kind of leapt a little bit. I said, well, okay, I think I could do pretty good in this one. And so the guys who they came really to see, they let all of them go first because they were the prospects. I wasn't really a prospect. I was just a kid they were going to let work out. And so when I came to the starting line, Matt, and I looked up, they were looking at me as if they didn't know who I was. And they were like, man, what is your name? And I told them, Scott Turner, and they had no idea, right? And they said, well, hey, come on, you can run, you're here. And it was almost like I was wasting their time, but they were there, so they said, okay, just come run. Well, they didn't know my name at first, but I said in my mind, they haven't seen me standing on a porch with my mama, broken and battered. They didn't see me running these stupid stadium steps day in and day out in Champaign, Illinois in freezing cold weather. And so, Matt, when I stood on the starting line, I didn't see 22 coaches. I saw 22 stopwatches. And just like I ran those stadium steps, I said, I'm going to get from here to there as fast as I can. And, man, I took off running. And when I crossed the finish line, they were amazed, and they started hollering and amazed, like, whoa. And the watches were 4:24, 4:25, 4:27, and so on and so forth. And so I ran a really fast time, and I thank God to this day that at that moment, that one opportunity, that I ran the fastest time that I had ever run in my life up until that point. Mm-hmm. And as I said before, when I was standing on the porch with my mother, I was 10 years old. And on that day I ran that 40, I was 23. And so that was 13 years, Matt, of preparation for 4.2 seconds. And it literally changed my life forever.
Yeah.
And I encourage people because oftentimes we like to put a clock on the dream. Well, it has to come to pass like this or at this point. Mm-hmm. But I encourage you, when I ask you, how long are you willing to hold on for your dream and the vision? 13 years of preparation for 4.2 seconds. That's a lot of years for a short period of time. But because of that, and I thank God for this, I was ready. I didn't have to get ready when they came. I was already prepared. And by God's grace, I ran that fast time. And then I got drafted April 22nd, 1995, pick number 226 to the Washington Redskins. And when I got picked, when North Turner called me on draft day, he said, you don't have a lot of experience. You don't have a lot of film, just one season. And he said, but you ran a 4.2 in a 40. And he said, we can work with that. You're now a Washington Redskin. And the rest was history.
Yeah, and that's amazing. And you spent 9 years in the league, which, for guys like me who didn't play in the league, I know one thing, actually two things. One is that the NFL stands for not for long. And the second thing is if you play 5 years, you get a pension. So congratulations.
Thank you.
But let's fast forward, because like so much of what you've done recently, in the limited time we have together is so important. And, I know in the Trump administration, you came at the White House. In fact, I think your first day on the job, you and I had lunch together with Rick Perry and Brooke Rollins in the Navy mess, and we talked about kind of what you'd done and what you're planned for. But it was really helping implement and revitalize some of our struggling communities. So why don't you talk a little bit about kind of your work at the White House and kind of what you learned from that experience?
Sure. So on April the 4th, 2019, President Trump appointed me to be the executive director of the White House Opportunity and Revitalization Council. This council was set up because of the opportunity zones that were part of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017. And so this newly formed council was made up of 15 domestic agencies and then our state and regional partners, Northern Border States, Delta Regional Authority, and Appalachian. And then the domestic agencies, of which obviously you know of HUD, labor, education, and so on and so forth. And my job was to be the ambassador for the Opportunity Zone Initiative around our country. Inside of Opportunity Zones are those poverty-stricken communities across the country, which every governor and territory leader nominated, and then the Treasury later certified. And so there's 8,764 Opportunity Zones around our nation. And my job was to travel to as many of these as I could with the message of revitalization, to build public-private partnerships, to convene stakeholders together. So elected officials, entrepreneurs, faith leaders, education leaders, community leaders, all at the same table, Matt, at one time, to have the hard conversation. Why is this area blighted? Why is there decay? Why haven't we seen any kind of investment? What's the pain of the community? And then at the same time, come up with solutions for long-term sustainability and ultimately community development and economic impact. And it was a life-changing experience for me. To be able to represent our country as you have so graciously, and to go into these communities at the behest of the White House, to build these public-private partnerships to serve the least of these, if you will, the most poverty-stricken areas in our country, to bring new life, not by way of government program, but by way of privately led, privately focused institutions and initiatives to bring economic and community impact. So I traveled to about 80 cities around the country leading this effort, and it was tremendously fruitful. And the work is not yet done.
Can you tell me about a couple of the projects that you've seen blossom out of that program?
Yes. So in Coatesville, Pennsylvania, one of the first Opportunity Zone projects or first Opportunity Zone businesses was from a lady, Susan Springsteen. And she purchased an old dilapidated building in downtown Coatesville and turned it into an innovation hub. So she and her business partner remodeled the building. They worked at the local high schools and I believe community college and brought in students and businesses in this innovation hub, and recently just built another brand new building next to that. So there's job creation, there's community impact, and there's economic development. That's one that I'm really just proud to see, because I saw it from when it was just an old building and dirt, literally just the ground. And now to be a great business. Also in Cleveland, Ohio, in the Tremont, Northeast Cleveland area, a brand new bakery with 97 units of workforce housing and retail wrapped around it in an opportunity zone. And there's so many here in West Dallas, an old strip mall that was purchased by Ray Washburn and his group. They turned that strip mall, the anchor store, into a grocery store, because you know, in a lot of urban distressed areas and rural distressed areas, there's a food desert and a health desert. And so now it's a brand new grocery store that employs people from the neighborhood. And there's many stories, Matt, but those are some that stick out that really touched me along the way because I've seen the impact of it.
Yeah, and it was such a smart and important program, and I know that Senator Tim Scott was one of the main proponents of that, putting that in the Jobs Act, and it's going to pay dividends for generations, because it incents people to do what needs to be done, revitalize our communities, build in places which typically wouldn't get capital put into it because there are advantages to that. So that's fantastic. Well, what are you doing now, Scott? I mean, I tell all the people that are watching Liberty and Justice, and I mean now they're totally hooked like I am. They're fans. What are you doing now? How are you serving your community and the nation, the greater nation?
Yes, sir. So from a community standpoint, I serve as associate pastor at Prestonwood Baptist Church here in Plano, Texas, which I love. I get an opportunity to preach the gospel and to minister and disciple families of the community. And also I serve at AFPI, the American First Policy Institute, as the chairman of the Center for Education Opportunity with my dear friend Brooke Rollins, yourself, and others. We're on that team to bring back, the policies and the legislation that make our country great. So that's been a great blessing. And then to serve with Dr. Ben Carson at the American Cornerstone Institute. And you know how much I love Dr. Carson.
Oh, he's such a great, decent man. He's really
yes, he is
one of a kind.
Right, and so that, and then at the America First Institute, Advancing American Freedom with former Vice President Pence, and helping him and his advisory council there. And so I'm serving by way of policies and legislation as you and I have, in the years past, so to keep those policies in front of the American people. And then from a business standpoint, the work that we were doing with opportunity zones, it was just so fruitful that I felt like the Lord wanted me to continue in that. And so I brought that same work now to the private sector, to partner with investors and developers and things of that nature, to build emerging markets, to build distressed communities by way of operating businesses, workforce housing, to give people an opportunity to be lifted up out of poverty and be self-sustainable. So I'm still doing the same work, but just now in the private sector.
Yeah. Well, that's amazing. And, one of the messages that I'm always trying to communicate through this show is, the American dream is unique to the United States of America. We need to share it and spread it across all of our fellow citizens in every community. I think you're a prime example of someone that's doing that. I want to encourage everybody, to live a life like Scott Turner, to do more with the blessings you have, to really lean in to those opportunities, because, you are what's great about our country, and I consider you a friend, and I'm lucky to have you as a friend.
Bless you.
Thanks for joining me on Liberty and Justice, and as everyone that watches this knows, it premieres every Friday at 7 p.m. on CPAC Now, and then, of course, you can see it on Whitaker.tv or anywhere else that you get podcasts or video shows. And so, Scott, until next time, we'll talk to you again.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate you.